So every day, the percentage of the world's economy increases digitally every day of the year and year after year. And the largest investor in this effort is here with us today, the Vision Fund of SoftBank. And today, the person who runs that fund, Rajeev, is with us today, so we're looking forward to an exciting tour of the present and the future. How do you run the world's largest fund?
Well, thank you first, Michael, for having me here. A lot has changed. I still remember March 2008 when I opened the conference with you, and I was doing credit investing those days, right up Mike's.
You were doing a lot more than credit investing. You were overseeing some of the largest credit pools in the world.
And I spoke about shorting subprime in March 2008, which was taken with a little bit of skepticism by the crowd. But congratulations for keeping this up for 20 years.
And I should have said, Rajeev, as we started, of all the venture capitalists in the world, you probably have a better feel and a better understanding for capital structure and financial markets. You know, many of the world's greatest venture capitalists understand a business, an industry, maybe where it's going. But there is no one that has the understanding of financial markets and capital structure and hundreds of different type of instruments that you do. So when I think of yourself, you can operate on both the left side and the right side of a balance sheet.
Well, debt capital is substantially cheaper than equity capital. I'll take it any day as a portfolio company over equity capital. But coming back to your question as to how we run our fund, Michael, I mean, if we take a step back and look at it holistically, we are going to celebrate our second anniversary in May next month. We started investing in May 2007, so we are ourselves, to some extent, a startup, the Vision Fund. In January 2007, we had 30 employees. We have roughly 400 employees today. That will grow and double over the next 18 months as we increase the scope of our portfolio companies. So, you know, as Master says, we love to build, and I still remember the fundraising process from the summer of 2016. September 2016, we started fundraising with a 20-page document. We had never raised third-party capital. We had never managed third-party capital at SoftBank. We had a track record of investing in the Alibabas, the Yahoos, the Yahoo Japans. And I put a presentation together. We were flying to meet an investor in the Middle East, and the presentation had $30 billion as the size of the fund, $10 billion from SoftBank, 20 from external investors. And when I meet him at the investor's office, right before the presentation, he had changed the number from 30 to 100 billion. And I was shocked. I said, "Why did you change the number?" He said, "Life's too short to think small." And that typifies Masa for you. And kind of that was the start of the journey. And when you believe in something, we ended up raising 100 billion by all means we could endeavor, of which a large piece, 35 billion, is SoftBank's own money plus management. So, you know, over the last 2 years, we have invested, to summarize, in 80 companies, deployed roughly $80 billion in exactly 2 years, hired close to 400 folks in the investment advisors business, and built a full front-to-back operation with offices being opened up in Shanghai, Mumbai, Singapore, apart from the Valley, London, and Tokyo, and built out from scratch a control function, which is compliance, finance, accounting, legal, etc. And also had them work together and gel together. So we are still in the process of building. We are about to close and finish investing our first fund. We'll stop at 85 billion. to 90 billion, keep money for follow-ons and for servicing our preferred coupons. But, and hopefully start raising our second fund in the next few months.
So let's talk about what prepared you for this role. You took Deutsche Bank and areas that you were focused on from 0 employees to 1,200. You led them. Did that prepare you? What else in life prepared you? Growing up in India, did that prepare you, where education was freedom? What is the background that prepared you to run at least one $100 billion venture capital firm with more $100 billion capital behind it? What prepared you?
Well, I won't go back to my childhood, but look, Masa and I believe in building businesses. And to build a business, you have to first, as Masa says, don't think analog, think out of the box and think big. Even if you get 80% there, that's good enough. So when you think about it, it's about recruiting. It's about, I moved to Deutsche Bank in 1996, it was not even 2000, to build a fixed income business from scratch where I hired 1,000 people. And it's about, we've done the same in the past 2 years, investing in 80 companies, which means looking at 400 companies and deciding to invest in 80 of them, helping those companies grow, hiring the people, building out all the regulatory framework, because we are regulated by the SEC, FSA, Japan, China, India, several regulators around the world. Being the largest tech fund, we are in the limelight, and hence keeping our LPs informed, and we have very supportive LPs who are fully vested and aligned with us. It's a large amount of capital they've entrusted us with, and it's public money, a lot of it, along with Apple and Qualcomm and a few other US corporates. So I guess the preparation is it becomes sixth sense when you recruit that many people as to who's going to work, who's not going to work. It's EQ in addition to IQ. It is, as you said, we are a good cross-section of technology investing with financial skills, which we help not only with our structuring of our fund, but also each portfolio company. We have at least a dozen projects where we are helping our portfolio companies raise capital off balance sheet to buy warehouses, to finance warehouses for Coupang, who are here, a South Korean e-commerce company, for Grab to buy cars to lease to their drivers, which is substantially cheaper at 7% than using equity capital, which costs 30%. For Oyo Rooms, for refurbishing hotels. And there are at least a dozen projects where we are providing $1 billion each to $500 million to Grab as substantially cheaper prices than 30%, which is what the cost of equity is at 6 or 7%. And we pride ourselves for helping our company from that perspective. But what I believe prepared us is Masa's kind of fearlessness. And from my perspective is the ability, we believed in 2017, January, when we had 30 people. We had financial capital, we had vision, we didn't have human capital. And it was a bit scary to not have human capital and have $100 billion to invest and saying, hey, how are we going to do it? And not to worry about and saying, we will get the people. And we'll get the people without having to spend that kind of money in taking out folks who have already several hundred million dollars of carried interest in existing firms, which was not, and who had a certain genetic code and a DNA and a thought process and an investing philosophy that wouldn't have fit ours. It's to be patiently recruit folks and recruit your direct management team who have come from many walks of life. Jeff Hausenbold, who was CEO of Shutterfly, Deep Nishar, who worked at LinkedIn and Google, Akshay Nahita, who ran his own hedge fund, Colin Fan, who ran global capital markets and trading at Deutsche Bank, and then let them hire the folks underneath them.
So it really struck me a couple years ago when I was interviewing Masa. And we were talking about, he went to Berkeley after I did, and he's on the street. And he's reading this magazine about a story of a computer on a chip. The first time he saw the microchip. And he starts to cry, thinking about this is the greatest creation of mankind. A computer on a chip, and it was going to revolutionize everything that we knew and change the world. So SoftBank has had this track record of knowing where to invest and what sectors to invest in. How do you see the future today?
So if we look at SoftBank's 30-year history, it was set up in the 80s by Masa. And in the 80s, it was about bringing software companies and being the distributor in Japan. The Oracles and the Intuits and so on. And the key of Masa's success is to be a step ahead of change. And if you look at it sequentially, it is about the desktop computer being replaced by mobile, starting off with software distribution, realizing very soon that you would get disintermediated and then they would go to the customer directly very soon, to start investing in the internet, realizing in the early 90s that the internet was coming. So hence we invested in Yahoo, Yahoo Japan, Alibaba in the late 90s. And then realizing in the 2000s that mobility is here to come. I mean, here's a man who bought Vodafone Japan, which is the third largest player, with a dominance of NTT and KDDI, before Apple came out with his smartphone. iPhones came out in 2007, and something that we take for granted today that we can't live our lives without. He bought Vodafone Japan in 2006, realizing the smartphone is coming and how important mobility is going to be. Of course, as you asked Mike, what do we see? That's the past. What do we see as the future? The future we see is that the growth of internet since the late 90s to today is going to now flatten out. It'll be 10% growth. I mean, there are a few hundred million people left who don't have access to the internet in India and Africa. But most of the world has internet access today and why is that? Because if we look at the past 15, 20 years, what are the few changes that have happened? One, processing power has increased 1 million times. You can have as much processing power in your smartphone as a desktop computer 15 years ago. Mobility speeds have increased. Your mobile phones with 4G have faster speeds, lower latency, bigger bandwidth. Your cost of data has come down. Voice is free. Data has become extremely cheap, even in places like India with Jio. So all that, we believe we are at the beginning of the AI revolution, and this is key. And we have a little slide up there. You know, our strategy is that what is our investment philosophy? Our investment philosophy is what we believe is the vision of, kind of correlates to your question. We believe every industry on our planet will get disrupted, and disruption is nothing wrong. Disruption means taking out the inefficiencies in the value chain. When a consumer is met by suppliers, there's the entire value chain of middlemen in the system, whether you're selling your car, whether you're selling your home, whether you're selling your goods and services through e-commerce, or an insurance policy, etc. If you look at, kind of simplistically put, what are we doing there is demand from a granular set of individuals, you and me and everybody else, which is met by producers of those products. And the producers of the products could be sellers of homes, sellers of cars, small merchants selling on an e-commerce platform, a insurance company selling policies, mom and pop hotels selling hotel rooms, truck owners selling capacity, is to invest in companies that create a platform in the middle that takes advantage and marries the demand with supply And over time, using AI is able to take away the intermediation and provide better products and services at a cheaper cost. And we'll see that happen, and I'll give you examples and case studies, and that applies to most of our 80 companies that we have invested in. And as these platforms get market share, they get up to 80% market share, what happens? They get more data, they learn, they get smarter, they're able to price better, they're able to dynamically price by the minute, a hotel room or the value of a car or value of a house, in the case of Open Door, value of anything. And over time, every day gets smarter. And that only comes with market share, because if you dominate the flow of data and you're able to use it using AI and you learn from it, you will provide a better quality service, better hotel rooms at a cheaper price, customized for someone like you, Mike. When you walk into that hotel room, it'll play the music you like to listen to and give you your hot water with lemon that you want to drink before you go to bed, and have the right pillow and the shampoos. So that's the secret of all our companies, and that's what we predict is going to happen, where it'll democratize and give more power to the consumer, where the consumer will get cheaper goods and services at a better quality, where that middle-aged woman trying to sell her used car somewhere in Italy or Spain doesn't have to go to her used car dealer in her small town, but using Auto One. Hakan Kok is here, our entrepreneur of Auto One, has now access to 45,000 dealers across Europe that can price the car and give her the money in 48 hours. She doesn't have to be beholden and at the mercy of one car dealer, used car dealer.
So Rajeev, when I think back 35, 40 years ago, one of the most difficult industries, and maybe the most difficult industry we had to finance, was mobile cellular. Convincing people to just have faith in the future. And one of the most interesting stories is a McKinsey study with AT&T, who invented that technology in late 70s, I think it was 79, put out this report saying there would be 1 million users in the year 2000 paying $1,000 a year. It was a $1 billion market, and AT&T and their laboratories who invented the technology decided not to go in the business because $1 billion business, was too small to go into. Well, by the year 2000, you were selling 1 million phones almost a day. And if you wanted to get the cellular franchise, mobile franchise for New York, you could apply, and it cost you $10,000 to apply. If you wanted Los Angeles, it cost you $10,000. And I'll never forget at a meeting at our institutional research conference, we had a young woman, as McCaw, who was really the driver of this, was making a presentation. And my idea is we would see how easy it was. And I think it was Wayne Perry, who was the president at the time. He was talking so long that the 3-pound phone, she couldn't hold it anymore. She was shaking, perspiring, and it probably delayed a year, the funding of cellular, and our goal that day. But something that has changed the world so fundamentally was so difficult, to get off the ground. And in this country is really John Kluge, who by '86 was the wealthiest person in the world, who went after cellular, or Craig McCaw's vision at that time. And AT&T bought McCaw in '93 to get into the business. What are you doing now? Okay, where are you investing? Okay, whether it's specific or generally. So you've given us the picture of the demand coming from an individual met by supply digitally, and the knowledge of what that customer wants. So where are you investing today?
So let me give you a big picture, and I'll show you where we are investing. We are kind of industry agnostic. We're investing, and this is a pretty picture, but these are our 80 companies, some of them. But what we are investing in is, we look at the general hypothesis, 10,000 feet view, Michael. We are meeting demand with supply where each individual supplier cannot invest in technology. A small hotel cannot invest in technology to make it efficient. A driver of an Uber car cannot invest in technology. A seller of a home cannot, but Open Door can. Platforms can invest in technology, can get the scale, can over time with the data get smarter and make decisions of pricing dynamically, pricing and providing quality and standardizing quality across that platform. If you look at all our companies, that's across different industries, and they are globally diverse. If you see, we have invested in 80 companies, roughly 45 to 50% of them are in the US, and I must say that in the past 2 years, our portfolio companies have added roughly 10,000 jobs in the US, and we have invested roughly $35 billion as the largest foreign investor in the US. That is SoftBank, with the help of our LPs, whose money we manage. But it's across many industries, but the fundamental theme is that they're matching granular suppliers of products that are too small to have the scale and be able to invest in capital or the capital to invest in technology. If you take Auto One or Didi or Fair or Logi or Flexport, I mean, I can go through the examples. I don't want to take too many of them, but I can take one. Let's take Cambridge Telematics. And Cambridge Telematics is a small company in Cambridge, Massachusetts, started by an MIT professor, a highly profitable company, $20 toggle that you put in your car. It improves driver behavior, reduces accidents by 30%. It has an accelerometer, a gyrometer, and a small black and white camera. If you meet with an accident, it photographs and finds out who's to blame. But most importantly, 16 insurance companies on the platform that pay Cambridge Telematics $1 to $2 per subscriber, 4 million users paid by the insurance companies. Why? Because it reduces the cost of insurance by 25 to 30% because it reduces accidents. And also helps the driver because if you meet with an accident, has taken pictures. Why did we invest and why did they take our money when they're profitable? We own 42% of the company. Why? Because our portfolio companies control the most number of drivers in the world. Between Didi, which has 20 million drivers, Grab, Ola, and Uber, we have 90% of the ride-sharing rides on the planet are between those 4 companies, apart from food delivery companies like DoorDash and others that we have invested in. So what we are investing in has 2 characteristics or 3 characteristics. First, of course, they are disrupting the industries they are in, whether it's automation anywhere, disrupting robotic process automation, and disrupting the whole process businesses, whether it's Flexport, disrupting shipping industry, or Oyo disrupting the hospitality industry, et cetera, et cetera. But the second dimension is that there is tremendous synergies between these companies now. We invest in companies that immediately, on a standalone basis, is a great investment, but together with our other 79 companies, or 80 companies, there is an additional alpha.
So you've talked about this infrastructure, this culture, and each company potentially, in many cases, helping another. Are there any other specific examples you'd like to address?
So let's
take us through the process, maybe with one company.
Let's take one company. Let's take one of our favorites. Let's take Oyo Rooms, a company that you don't know about. We invested 2 years ago at the inception of the fund. The fund owns 50% of that company. Started off in India, 25-year-old entrepreneur today. He was 23 2 years ago. Started off by providing a software platform. It's basically a franchise unbranded budget hotel chain. Started off in India by going to hotels and saying, look, you have 40% occupancy. I guarantee you 60% occupancy. With my guarantee, you go in and borrow a few $1,000s to refurb the hotel to my standards, but having the right bed linen, the right lobby and check-in place, CCTV. And what is it for the hotel owner? Number one, their revenues go up because they're not just from increasing prices, but from occupancy. Number two, their wastage comes down because everything goes digital, no cash business. Every booking, everything is digital. The hotel owner by the hour knows how much money they're making. Housekeeping is digitized, and you can do it with less staff, with pictures, and it's standardized. But most fundamentally now, what they are able to do is even price the hotel room dynamically, by the minute. If you call in to book a hotel room 2 months from now, based on the weather, based on historical data, based on expected occupancy, based on what events are happening in the city, they're able to price the hotel room to fill the space. And what did we do to help the company, apart from giving capital? We took them to China a year and 3 months ago, January 2018, without a partner into China. The entrepreneur and the founder moved to China. Over the past 15 months, has hired 8,000 staff in China, has gone from 0 to 400,000 rooms. It's become the 7th largest hotel chain today, Oyo, in the world. There's some.
Let's spell that, because not everyone.
O-Y-O.
And
So,
let's tell people where this 23-year-old that you identified, where was he living when you found him?
we met him, it was an interesting anecdote. So we met him in Delhi, December 2016, and we invested in it in 2017. And give it to Masa. He was looking for capital. The company was valued at $500 million. Masa said, here's $500 million, I take 50% of the company. And the guy said, I don't know what to do with that kind of money. I got a few thousand hotel rooms in India. Masa said, look, your formula works. Invest in technology, invest in AI, just go hire a few thousand people, sign up hotels. 80% of hotel rooms in this world is unbranded. It's not the Marriotts and the Hiltons and so on. They're unbranded mom and pop hotels across the world. You go to London, Paris, China, Houston, where have you. And I said, here's $500 million. We take 50% ownership. We help you grow across the globe. Here's a company that we have helped immensely. So what do we do with our companies? We meet them every 6 to 8 weeks. We amplify their vision. We give them courage and support to say, look, you're not growing fast enough. And Hakan Kok and others, the founder of Auto One, will testify to it. I mean, he'll come and say, I'm growing 60%, Rajeev. He sells used cars in Europe. A 200 billion euro market a year. 200 billion euros of used cars get sold a year. He comes proudly and tells me he's going to do 4 billion of used cars, up from 2.5 billion last year. I say, hey, it's only 2% of the market. Hey, why aren't you growing 200%? Let's go and meet Guangzhou, which is doing used cars in China, and learn from their mistakes. We have our portfolio companies interact with each other, because there's no harm and there's no point in building something and reinventing the wheel when somebody else has already made the mistakes. We give courage to our portfolio companies to make mistakes and learn from it, because if you look at a good entrepreneur, they're able to recalibrate the model every week, every month, because disruption is where you're moving so fast that you're learning from your mistakes and being able to correct it as you go. And a lot of the mistakes about customer acquisition, how much does it cost to get customers in, or how easy you make mistakes in hiring folks. And Oyo Rooms in China has hired from January 2018, in the 15 months, 8,000 folks. When you hire 8,000 folks locally, you will make mistakes, but that's okay. It's better than not doing so. So we help a lot of our entrepreneurs. Every 8 weeks to 6 weeks we meet. We go through a review for half a day. And I'll tell you what's the biggest change in the 2 years. When you've invested in 80 companies, we ourselves are learning so much. It's becoming sixth sense. And we are able to transfer some of that learning from one portfolio company to another.
So Rajeev, you know, many years ago, it's now 25, 26 years ago, we created this model. It was called CapCure. Today it's Faster Cures. And we created a train program where we took disease-specific foundations and we made sure that they had best practices and shared them. So you could launch a disease-specific foundation so much quicker by understanding what worked, what didn't work, what were the mistakes, how do you interact, how do you accelerate research, how do you identify young scientists. But in each case, we were significantly focused on who was the CEO. Who is leading the Melanoma Research Alliance, or getting Dr. Jonathan Simons to lead the Prostate Cancer Foundation, or Debbie Brooks, who is going to lead the Michael J. Fox Parkinson Foundation. Let's step back. You've got 75 to 80 companies. The CEO is so important. An individual that's willing to try, learn from mistakes, adjust. We all know that when you set out on a path, that path might change due to many factors in the world. How are you identifying CEOs, and what are you looking for in the case of CEOs? And can you give us a couple examples of individual CEOs that you'd point to?
Sure. So when we look at investing in a company, and look, we meet potential portfolio companies who come and pitch to us a couple a day. And it has already gone through the filter.
How many companies would you say you looked at to get down to 75 or 80? So if you invested in 75 or 80, how many did you look at one? And how many came to you versus you going to them?
Yeah. So that has changed dramatically, because if you go back 2 years, SoftBank and the Vision Fund was not an established brand. We didn't have the ecosystem. We had the capital, but we didn't have the brand or the ecosystem. Today versus 2 years ago, anybody looking for capital today, most 80% of the companies looking for capital today will call us. So when our team, I can't say we add a lot of value by identifying companies and going out and finding them. The value we add is deciding which ones to invest in and which ones not to invest in. That's a fortunate situation. But coming back to which companies we invest in, of course you look at the obvious stuff. What is the market size? What is the size of the disruption, inefficiency in the industry that they're going to disrupt? Is the unit economics work? Does the model work? Because a lot of the companies, the model doesn't work. So it's obviously the opportunity is important, but the CEO, coming back to your question, is critical, because if you are a David taking on a Goliath, which is the case in most of our companies, you're taking on an established incumbent in those, which has been around 100 years, is worth tens of billions. You're taking on the Marriotts and the Hiltons. You're setting up a hospitality company by saying, look, I'll be the biggest hospitality company, hotel chain in the world, as an example. Or you are Open Doors saying, look, I'll disrupt how homes are sold, or a Compass, how homes are brokered, or a Guatsi saying, look, I will disrupt the used car and new car sales process in the largest car market in China, which is in the world, which is China. And trying to create a $40, $50 billion company from inception, the CEO is critical in many ways. I think the number one is humility, because you have to be able to learn and change, because you have to make mistakes. Number two, which has to stay for a while, even though you get successful, that's when it derails arrogance. Number two is their ability to attract talent, because they grow so fast. Our biggest problem with our 80 portfolio companies is not financial capital. They have money. Billions in the bank still is human capital. Hiring the next level of management. They grow faster than their people. And we get loyal to our people. They get loyal. They don't want to change the CFO or the chief of staff or the head of business development or head of HR because they already started with some people. And how do you scale that? And Oyo Rooms, again, he moved to China. Now he's moved to Houston. Is to hire a whole level of people, is to hire thousands of folks, train them, put them together. So fearlessness to take on the Goliaths, and complete belief that they are going to win, no matter what, complete belief. And we help them with that. And we tamper with their business model, give them whatever it takes, as long as they're on the right track, give them capital. Tony at DoorDash, 3.5 years ago, the company didn't exist. Today, he has 27% of the food delivery business in the US. It's the 7th most popular app download in the US. And the examples go on. I don't want to pick my favorite children here. But these are entrepreneurs who are fearless, who are able to recruit, who are able to think out of the box and adapt. Adapt is very important. And I'll tell you an example. This is very important because, say, a Coupang, and Bom Kim is here from South Korea, the biggest e-commerce platform in South Korea, had to change his model several times. And South Korea is an interesting market. Doesn't have Amazon, doesn't have Uber. Ride sharing is not legal in South Korea and doesn't have Amazon. But it's highly fragmented e-commerce business. Very successful, has 13% market share, highly fragmented. But once you have 20, 30 million customers going through your e-commerce platform, you want to become a super app. Saying, how do I monetize that customer base? How do I cross-sell other stuff, like food delivery? Because you already have your delivery infrastructure. You already have your drivers delivering packages. Why not deliver grocery, food? Why not have a payment app? Because you have so many transactions going through your system. You have 12 billion of GMV. You have 12 billion of transactions going through your system. Why not put a payment app system there? And then start lending money on the back of the payment system to your small merchants. And they've started food delivery. They've started payments. They've started grocery delivery. And become a super app. Same with Grab. So these entrepreneurs have to change their business model, have to cross-sell and add to the business model, as Tony at DoorDash will be doing soon. He's got food delivery, but he'll do groceries, he'll do other staples in the evening, and increase the bandwidth of those companies.
You know, it's interesting when I think back, whether it was John Malone or let's take Bill McGowan at MCI. When I met him, they had less than 100 employees. And I was trying to convince my firm that he was so talented and so charismatic. Here was a company that had to get out there and borrow every 2 weeks to make its payroll. But people would leave established companies and take the risk with him. And in many ways, his biggest obstacle was access to capital. And eventually, we had this meeting, and I told them that, you know, you're right. I've been thinking about the relative value of AT&T with 1.4, 1.5 billion employees, and this company here with 100. But after I analyzed it, I felt that AT&T didn't have enough employees. They would need at least 2 million employees to offset Bill McGowan. So it wasn't a fair fight, and eventually all of telecom as we know it in this country was changed once Bill had access to capital, and AT&T today is not AT&T. It was Southwest Bell that bought AT&T. Mm-hmm. And so I think the point you're making, if you're going to get people that are going to scale, you have to find an individual who has the talent to be able to take a small company to a very large company.
Tremendous amount of self-belief, and have the humility to tamper and adapt the business model. And what we're realizing more and more is to also have the ability to go global. They start off in China, they start off in India, or they start off in the US. But once the model works, to take it to other continents. But coming back to capital, Michael, you provided more capital in the 80s and 90s than anybody else. But where we add quite a bit of value as a tech investor also is the intersection of tech and finance that we believe we are unique in, because we help a lot of our portfolio companies in many different ways get access to debt capital, which is substantially cheaper, and I've spoken about it before, whether it's secured with properties, a coupon to finance their warehouses, in OU rooms to finance this refurbishment of the hotels, or a Grab to finance taxi drivers to buy cars.
So I want to go back to an unusual situation. I went to Wall Street in the late 60s, and in the 70s, at one point, we might have been the only source of capital. But so many small businesses were in need of capital that were denied it at the time when the markets weren't fully developed. And over the years, we actually had to help raise money from money managers in order to create that market. You're competing in a much different market today, if I reflect today, 50 years later. The people that have the most capital are these other software firms and other technology firms, whether it's Microsoft or Apple or Google or Facebook or Tencent or Alibaba. They are, in many ways, cash flow machines. They're generating billions and billions of cash flow. And so in some way, whereas we might have been the primary source of capital in the 70s and early 80s, by mid-80s there was competition from numerous firms, including the one you went and built. But today you're competing with companies that have $100 billion in cash, $200 billion in cash. You're competing for other technologies, and you're competing against companies that are sophisticated. So they don't really need the financial system. They're generating with their own cash. Talk a little bit about that competition.
We have some of that competition. The best example of a tech company investing in growth capital is Tencent in China. Because if you look at the Apples, Microsoft's, Amazon's, Google's, Alibaba, Tencent, and we are a 28% shareholder in Alibaba and on the board of Alibaba. And they're doing it, but they're doing it synergistically where it makes strategic sense for them. Because they're public companies. They are investing in companies more for control. A lot of our entrepreneurs don't want to give up control. They did not start a business to become an employee yet. At the right price, they will. A Flipkart will sell to Walmart at some price. And we invested at $10.5 billion, and 6 months later, we sold it to Walmart. Those are unique situations at $20 billion. But most of our entrepreneurs don't want to sell out yet. So they're not available for sale. They will take money from us as a minority investor, not for control, where we help them, but they get to run the companies. We are extremely entrepreneur friendly. We help them in many dimensions, but we don't run those companies day to day. We are not a private equity investor who are investing for control, or neither do we have the resources with 400 employees to go and run 80 companies. We have hired 30-odd folks as operating partners to help our companies grow, but that's more for growth than, God forbid, they get into trouble. And we have to help them out, and there are a few examples of that. But coming back to your question, are we seeing competition from tech companies with their cash? I think it'll be more for exits for us than these companies investing for the sake of investment. I won't take names, but no shareholder today wants a company to invest to make investment returns. They're getting paid, and Microsoft is getting paid as a multiple of revenue on their cloud revenues, not for the investment returns or the returns they make on their cash by making extra 2% yield on their cash or 3%. That's not going to get rewarded in the stock market.
So Rajeev, I think you've touched on a really important point. If I'm one of these 75, 80 companies and I've come into the Vision Fund family, when you talk to them, first you allow them to run their business. Second, you have all this knowledge around the world about what companies. What does it mean to be a company that the Vision Fund and SoftBank have invested in? When you're talking to companies, what does it mean to be one of those companies?
Yeah, so why would somebody, different way to put the question, why would somebody want our money? And we do invest in companies on a standalone basis, as I said, on their own merit, but then the alpha comes from the synergies. But there are a couple of dimensions we help our portfolio companies. The first dimension, obviously, is that when you have 80 companies, those 80 companies are a client of that company. An Automation Anywhere coming in, which is a B2B company, long sales cycle, convincing a business to take an Automation Anywhere and to automate their accounting or payroll or HR, call centers, etc. We have Marcelo Clore, the chairman of Sprint here. An Automation Anywhere, with Marcelo's help, gets into Sprint immediately. Gets into SoftBank Mobile. SoftBank Mobile has 35 million customers in Japan, has tens of thousands of retail shops, has a big sales force of thousands of folks selling to SMEs in Japan. So an Automation Anywhere goes to Japan, hires 300 people in the past 5 months since we have invested, and had no presence in Japan. And now has a presence in Japan with 300 employees selling to SMEs in Japan. A WeWork wouldn't be in Japan without SoftBank. The first 2 buildings a year ago was taken by SoftBank. And now they have dozens of buildings in Japan. And that's Japan. So the first dimension is getting help from the remaining 80 companies in the Vision Fund, plus another 20 companies in SoftBank Group. Yahoo Japan, Sprint, SoftBank Mobile, etc. So there are 100 companies that immediately can be a potential client. Not at uneconomic terms, but at the best economic terms, as the most favored clients. The second dimension that these portfolio companies get help from is by going global. We take them to Asia. Going into China, like I said about Oyo, going into Japan, like WeWork, all of them. Katera, doing modular housing in Abu Dhabi and Saudi and in India. Big. An Oyo room into China with our help. Paytm, learning from Alipay, which is the biggest payment company in the world, and going into Japan with Yahoo Japan, doing payments for Yahoo Japan. Numerous examples. If you look at a slide I wanted to show, is the geographical expansion that we're helping these companies. Because all these companies are busy growing in the US or in India or whatever geography they're in. Without our help, they don't have the time or the bandwidth or the management to grow. So we help them grow in these geographies, whether it's in Saudi or in Abu Dhabi or in Japan or in China, with our help. And once they get critical mass and escape velocity, it becomes big for them.
One of the areas I know you're very focused on is market share, and getting to market share as fast as you can. Here's the slide showing you the movement around the world.
Not comprehensive, but a limited example. Cohesity is a data management company. I mean, look, we're moving them across the globe. They're growing outside their home markets with our help. And it's immense alpha that we're adding there. And so those two are the two kind of axes we are adding value. Working with each other, the 80 companies, learning from each other, learning from the mistakes, Paytm learning from Alipay, Auto One learning from Guozi in China, and vice versa. And second is taking them global.
When we talk about market share, I know one of the things you've been very focused on the Vision Fund is number 1. Not number 2, not number 3, not number 4, but the importance of being the leader. Talk to us a little bit about, because I have a lot of people that get excited about being number 2 or being number 3. And a lot of consulting companies often talk about how important it is to be one of the top 4 or 5 companies. Wow. You have been so focused on being the #1 in the field, wherever in the world you are.
So, look, we made mistakes. We invested, I'll tell you about learning from mistakes ourselves. We invested $700–800 million in a company called Snapdeal, 2014 in India. Did e-commerce in India, was number 2 or 3 after Flipkart and Amazon. And it is cheaper to get market share at the beginning than 2 years later. Costs substantially more to get that 10% extra market share 2 years later or a year later than it is today. Once your business model is out there, if you don't rapidly get the market share and the mind share and the brand, substantially cheaper because capital is going to come in once the margins are there. So it is a myth when people say, oh, customer acquisition cost is so much and this and that. We say, just then if customer acquisition cost is $10, why don't you give it out for free for a month? That's what it costs, it's $10. Create a splash, get folks in, and once you have market share, as I showed the power of AI, once you have the data, once you have the traffic, you can make better decisions. You can cross-sell a lot of other services to that same population. Whether you're selling cars, you can cross-sell financing, you can sell insurance along with the car. If you're selling homes, you can sell content insurance and finance the home, or do the registration. You can cross-sell so many things once you have the traffic and the market share. It becomes extremely expensive to buy market share a few years down the road, 10 times more expensive than at the beginning. It's very important to get it. And with AI, the power of data is so important that the more you create for the competition, once you have the market share, it's very difficult for someone to breach.
Let's touch for a moment on the Internet of Things. Made a large acquisition out of United States and Europe of a company in this area. And with G5, you're going to have such a substantial increase in ability to communicate at one time. I'm assuming the number of things that are going to be connected will increase geometric. Talk to us about that decision and the Internet of Things.
Mike is alluding to ARM, and we bought ARM in 2016, roughly 2.5 years ago, late summer of 16. And ARM is an amazing company. It's got 99 to 100% market share for CPUs and GPUs and a couple of chips in the chipset for every smartphone in the world today. It has substantial market share in the auto industry too for chips, smart chips, and is now making inroads into the server business. It's an IP company, doesn't manufacture, and the company on its own, it's going to grow dramatically. But the reason we bought it is because we believe that, ARM chips, roughly 15, roughly last year was a few billion ARM chips got sold across cars and phones and iPads and notebooks and so on. But the big boom is with Internet of Things, where it's not the money we will make from selling these chips that are going to go in homes and your shoes and your car and your clothes, refrigerators, home appliances, etc., street lights all over. But the data you collect from that, and that data is going to be so invaluable. Of course, a lot of that will belong to the OEMs, will belong to the consumer. But as a data lake on an anonymous basis, you can make so many inferences from that data to make informed decisions, to create smart cities, to conserve energy, to create traffic flow for ride-sharing companies, to create controlled traffic lights, et cetera, to design products, and so on, that we believe the value of that company is going to be more a software and a data company than a hardware IP company over time. And that's what we're investing in ARM, to make it more a software and an IP company with smart meters and smart home appliances and so on, where the data goes into a data lake in the cloud, and we'll have some access to that data to make to create innovative products.
Rajeev, in closing, as a firm, Vision, the SoftBank, maybe has a better view of the future with your team you've assembled than anyone. Tell us what the world looks like 10 years from now that we might not expect is going to happen.
With all humility, I mean, we are a startup, as I said. We are learning as we go. We didn't exist 2 years ago. We're still at early stages. We've been lucky to have collected a beautiful portfolio of companies that are doing extremely well. We've had 2 exits, NVIDIA and Flipkart. We have a bunch of IPOs, hopefully this year. Mike, I believe disruptors of today will get disrupted in 5 years' time, 10 years' time. Some of our portfolio companies that are disrupting today might get disrupted down the road or get enabled. I believe mobility will change dramatically with autonomous vehicles. We have invested in GM Cruise, in Nuro for delivering, for non-passengers, for delivering products, in ATG, Uber. By 2022-23, I believe there will be thousands of autonomous vehicles in the streets of major cities in the West. I believe ownership of products will be very different. I mean, as you see today, ownership of cars are coming down, ownership of homes are going to come down, co-living is going to go up, and the cities will change. You don't need so much real estate for parking, for retail shops, for you won't have. People won't buy a second car or a third car. The whole auto industry is going to change. So it's hard to predict, and I don't want to make dramatic predictions, but I believe that a lot of what we take for granted today, like the smartphone, which didn't exist 12 years ago, will change dramatically. A lot of stuff with retail outlets, with hotels, mobility, the way we consume food and restaurants, with dark kitchens, where you get your food delivered within 15 minutes. A company we have invested in, Park Jockey, which has 6,000 parking lots. We'll convert a lot of those, 20% of those parking lots. It'll still be a parking lot, but 20% of the parking lots to dark kitchens. With the heat maps, knowing the demand in every zip code from DoorDash as to what people want to eat in that neighborhood. And that will change over time. And you can be flexible in changing the restaurants and have pop-up kitchens change of top-end restaurants. But what I can tell you, and I'll end with this, is it'll democratize. The power is moving to the consumer. The consumer will get cheaper goods and services with a better quality. And all the inefficiencies as they drive out will keep inflation at bay, and which is what we're seeing last couple of years. And also give some power to the suppliers and take away the inefficiency in between the suppliers and the consumers and take out some of the middlemen and the inefficiencies.
So tomorrow morning, Rajeev, between 7 and 9, our Global Capital Markets group at the Milken Institute will meet. So these are sovereign wealth funds, insurance companies, pension funds, endowments, foundations, family offices, and in some cases, corporations. And they have tens of trillions of dollars, and they're searching for a rate of return. Most of them would be very happy if they knew they could get 8%, some 6%.
I would be with my money.
Okay, but give us a feeling for, I know, what is your expectation and goal, and when you think about the companies you're investing in, and what your track record has been the last couple years in terms of rate of return?
Look, it's early days, Mike. Our portfolio is still, like a early vintage wine. It'll take some time to mature. As I said, we've had 2 exits. We'll have 3 IPOs in our portfolio this year. And sometime next year, we'll have 2 IPOs a month of the remaining 70-odd companies. Our we had a couple of misperceptions about our portfolio when we started 2 years ago, Mike. People said, how can you invest $100 billion? You are driving up valuations. You won't be able to make money. $100 billion, the entire venture capital world is less than $100 billion. How can you even deploy it? So guess what? We have deployed it in 2 years, not 5 years. Time will tell, but we hope to make 25–30% returns.
Well, and I think your investors hope you'll make 25 or 30% return. So, Rajeev, thank you. And one thing we're sure of is the investments by the Vision Fund will accelerate disruption in the world,
in a good way.
Create new businesses, and probably accelerate the choices for consumers, controlling prices and access. So, thank you, and
thank you for having me,
your
Mike.
vision.
Thank you.